So without further ado, let's kind of get into it. The way we're going to work is I'm going to introduce these three people in turn. They're going to do a 10-minute kind of each about where they are in their careers and where we can find them. One will be a conversation, just because Amber, who is joining us, is recovering still from a little bit of a concussion. So if you see her drop off, it's just her videos going off to save her eyes, that's all. But it's great to have all of you with us. And our first speaker up today is Chantel Cole. And I'm not going to go too much into her bio, which is fascinating, other than to say we find her as the program director for GDSR, that's New Zealand On Air, which is a brand new thing. So I'm really excited to have Chantel present to you, both in terms of her legacy and pedigree, as well as what she's up to. So Chantel, the digital stage is all yours.
Thank you so much, DK, and morena, everyone. It's good morning in Te Reo. So I'm Chantel Cole. I'm currently the Program Director for the Game Development Sector Rebate in New Zealand. So that's basically a rebate designed to support our games industry here, and it's brand new, just started this year. But my career started a little bit differently. I actually started my career as a graphic designer after training at Massey University in Wellington in visual communications design. And I entered my career in a startup, actually, a startup design and printing company, quite different from where I am now. And it was very much a scrappy little business. There were just three of us, and we worked really long hours, and we cared a lot about our clients and our customers, and we grew that company to be something that actually spread across New Zealand. We had branches across the country, and through that part of my career, I learned about values-based leadership. And there was a point there where I realized I was managing the team, looking after all of our corporate kind of high-end clients by the day, and then doing all the graphic design work at night, and that was just becoming unsustainable. And so it was actually a difficult decision to make. Do I choose the pathway of the degree that I trained in, or do I diverge into more of a leadership role? And I decided that for me, as long as I was supporting creatives and around creatives making amazing things, that was kind of enough for me. So I decided to move into a leadership space. And from then, I'd been there about 7 years, and I felt I really needed to step out of my comfort zone and give myself a bit of a challenge. So I actually ended up in the music industry. And while at one of our concerts in Auckland, I was on a flight back, and actually there had been a storm in the morning and all of the flights had been grounded. And because of that, all of those passengers were moved onto the afternoon flights, and one of those passengers happened to be the co-founder of a video game studio in New Zealand called Dinosaur Polo Club. And we got chatting when we were talking about game music and the things that we love about creative industries, and then we would catch up regularly for coffee and talk about values-based leadership. And they ended up leading to me moving into the games industry. They approached me about a role. It was the role of studio manager. And I remember saying to them, I think a lot of women do this as well, like, are you sure you want me to apply for that role? Like, don't you want someone from the games industry? And they said, well, actually, we really want to bring more perspectives into the team, people that have come from different industries. And so I moved into that role, and I really loved it. And when I joined the team, we were still a very small studio, about 9 people. And then we grew to about 32 over the last few years. It's a BAFTA nominated studio. It's the makers of some games that you might or might not know. One of them is actually very British inspired, Mini Metro. It was inspired by the London Underground. And they're systems-based games where you build the network of a subway system, those sorts of things. But they're very much inspired by a graphic design aesthetic, so I felt naturally quite drawn to it. So when we went to make our second game, Mini Motorways, we were actually approached by Apple. They'd seen how well our first game had done on the App Store, and they had a top secret project. And it was actually Apple Arcade. So for those of you that don't know, Apple Arcade is basically a game subscription service, kind of like Netflix. But what was unique about it was that they wanted to launch it with 100% brand new content, which had never been done before. So they wanted to launch this new streaming service where every single game on it was brand new. So they commissioned games to be made all around the world, and 7 studios in New Zealand were actually commissioned to make games for that launch. And that was really incredible because they approached about 100 studios at the time. And the fact that 7 of them came from New Zealand when our workforce was only 450 people in the games industry then was really amazing to see. And I think it just showed that our creative teams really punch above their weight. And that is something I really observed in the games industry in New Zealand, is that it's really a very beautiful community. Everyone really supports each other. They openly share their learnings. One of my favorite questions is asking what people learned the hard way as well. And they'll share their resources, their connections. They might not be able to talk about the IP that they're working on, but they are so willing to kind of lift everyone up and bring them on the journey. And so I felt incredibly supported by all of the people I met along the way, Amber actually being one of them. And it's a really beautiful industry that really kind of bands together, I suppose, to achieve greatness. So since I joined the games industry, which is about 5.5 years ago, it has more than doubled in size in New Zealand. There's about 1,100 people working in the industry now, but it's actually worth over $500 million, which is pretty impressive. That's each person bringing in around $520,000. So it's doing really well. For New Zealand, I don't know if this is something you relate to, but it's now worth more than wool, which is like a big deal here. It's something a lot of Kiwis do recognise. But what it did lack was support. There wasn't really any ability for people to get funding for games, particularly, larger concepts. There were very small grants that maybe student teams would kind of look into, but anything sustainable for a team of more than one person to be able to create a working prototype didn't really exist. And so there was a lot of advocacy from all of us. We all banded together to kind of talk to government about the need for the support and also the benefits of it. And that was kind of the key message, was we've managed to achieve a lot on our own and we're doing incredibly well, but we are starting to see attrition where a lot of our seniors are moving overseas to get more opportunities. A lot of them are moving to Australia, where there was higher pay and the introduction of a rebate there. And we were going to lose that really impressive momentum, which at the time had been 46% growth year on year for 10 years, which is, I think, the fastest growing industry in New Zealand. And with the introduction of the Australian rebate, that dropped right down to 7% for the first time in a really long time. And it's still growing, which is wonderful, but we could kind of see the impact of not having that ability to support, particularly those startup companies where sort of 19 out of 20 would bootstrap their way through and most of them would fail and maybe one would make it through. But our kind of dream was that we could get to a place where maybe 19 out of 20 could succeed. So for a number of years, we talked to the government, and what you might have experienced, maybe some of you, is that you kind of spend quite a bit of time just educating people about how your industry even functions. And then that person often moves to a different department and then you have to start from scratch with a new one. So it is quite a bit of work to build that knowledge base with these people that are in these positions of power. But ultimately, by all joining as a united voice, we were able to be heard. And last year, the government announced that they would be launching a new games rebate of 20% back on game development staff and the software that they use towards making those games. And that was a really incredible achievement from everyone that kind of spoke with that shared voice in order to support each other. And something else we've seen created in the ecosystem over the last couple of years that's been incredible is also the Centre of Digital Excellence. So they are essentially like an incubator. They help startup teams or small teams of maybe veteran team members that have come from other studios, and they actually teach them how to run a business, because a lot of us have really learned that the hard way. We might know how to make games, but we don't necessarily know how to support our people And we have really big, audacious goals there. So one of the things I was really proud to achieve when I became the CEO of Dinosaur Polo Club before I took on this role to support the community was being able to get our team of leaders to 50% women, and our entire studio team up to close to 50% as well. At the moment, our industry is around 21% women. And so we had a lot of, I suppose, strategies around how we wrote our job ads, how we brought people in from other industries and retrained them and created those equitable pathways. And the Centre of Digital Excellence, I think, teaches a lot of people those values right from the ground up. They also have a full-time Māori consultant who connects with local iwi or tribes to make sure that that community is being served and being listened to, and that their culture is also being respected when it's being portrayed in games. And now in my role as the program director for the game development sector rebate, I administer the rebate and help distribute those funds to New Zealand studios. We did our first round this year, which was 22.3 million, which was paid out in July, which was incredible. The first time that sort of money has gone into our industry here, and it saved a lot of jobs. It also created a lot of new jobs and new projects being made. But alongside that work, we also want to help create more equitable pathways across the whole nation, and that's part of the work that I'm doing with my team at NZ On Air as well, is what else can we do to make sure we're connecting with underrepresented communities and people and bringing them along on the journey, because ultimately game development is something that connects with people all over the world, and if you don't have different voices in the room making those games, then you're never going to actually really be able to connect with different communities. I think I've hit my 10-minute mark roughly, so I'll hand back to DK.
Oh, thank you, Chantal. I appreciate you aiming for the time, but obviously you could go on, and I'm hoping you've said enough that teased enough people to go, I want to know more about X, Y, and Z, and I'm sure we'll get into the granularity of kind of what you're doing, how you've done it, and what you can share as well in terms of that. But thank you for kicking us off. Really appreciate that, and some real deep innovation and imaginative services going on here in New Zealand to support the games development community, as you can appreciate there. So let's get into our next speaker and keep the kind of momentum going and hearing from people who are doing impressive things. So I want to invite Greg to turn on his mic, and you'll find Greg with us here again, a seasoned co-founder / CEO of many different things. And again, I don't want to kind of speak for him other than to say a very impressive individual doing impressive things, have done, and now really going into a space that is untested, but in some ways really exciting. And I'm sure you'll recognize that once he starts describing it. So Greg, it's great to have you with us, and the digital stage is all yours, man.
Fantastic. Thank you, DK. And tēnā koutou katoa. Yes, and Marina, good morning, everybody up in Wales. Greg's my name. I came into the, I guess, entertainment sector in 2008, 2009. I came from a technical background. I was working in IT infrastructure as well as working in development, software development. And I was fortunate enough to come in during the global financial crisis, for those who remember that back in those days. And it's really the best time to come in and start a new business. And I was asked to come in by a good friend of mine, Dylan Coburn, into a 3-person animation studio here in Wellington. And we would scale up during those years to 5 or 6 people. And we did a lot of TV commercials, animated TV commercials. What I found, though, after being there for a few months, was I didn't realize how unstable of a business we were in. So, you know, TV commercials are fantastic. They come and they go as fast as they arrive. You know, everyone loves it. They dive into that space. They work hard for 3 to 5 weeks, and they deliver a small 30-second commercial. Quite lucrative in the 2000s, but by 2010, it wasn't the best business to be running. And so I thought that we needed to build a studio that was bigger than TV commercials, long format animation. What you see behind me is what we ended up creating. All of this work for Marvel. And I often get asked, how do we do that? How do we actually achieve that? And so firstly, it was not overnight. There was a lot of trust and a lot of patience in our plan. Los Angeles is 12 hours away on a flight. I would go into America 3 to 4 times per year for about 3 years before I secured the Marvel work. And rocking up was really important. And my message today is actually all about that, is you've got to show up. If you don't show up, you have no hope. And so by showing up into America, I didn't go in there and say, hey, give us some work. I went in there and showed them what we could do. And I went in with, it was great because we were making so many TV commercials, animated TV commercials. The best thing about that paddle work is that they're always different. People want the next best thing. So we were playing around with all these different techniques between motion graphics, 2D animation, on the cusp of new 3D and visual effects. And so when we went into places like Disney, Nickelodeon, Warner Brothers, they were a little bit envious that we were always, they being me, showing up with something new. Every 3 months, I was like, hey, look at this, look at this. And so to be able to go into America a lot and show them what we were doing built trust. They probably didn't like me showing up as often as I did, but it built over time a trust that then they started to ask after about 2 years, hey, would you like to try and make something for us? And so we started small. We were asked to make a 9-minute TV pilot for Fox. It was a CG animated dog show, another dog show. And it didn't take off, like it fell over on its feet. But there was something very important about just showing up and forming this creative partnerships, as I met one key guy during that time. And this producer who ended up being a key producer at Marvel. And he liked the way that we had worked as a little studio trying to perform. We were asked then to make a 1-minute pilot of Spider-Man for a TV series. And there I was like, great, this is awesome. And I said, will you pay for this? They said, no, you need to pay for it. So we came back to New Zealand and found $20,000 of our own money, which is about £10,000. And off we went for a month and we made this amazing 1-minute pilot for Spider-Man. I shared it with the folk who were going to produce the Spider-Man series. And it wasn't Disney at that point. It was just pre-Disney. And they said, this is great, come on over to America. So got out my credit card, swiped it again, flew on another plane to America and got there, walked into their office and they said, Greg, can you produce 26 half hours of Spider-Man? We love your test. I said no. And they freaked out. They said, why are you in my office? And I said, what I mean by no is I can't produce the entire series myself in our studio. We're too small. But what we can produce is the following. And I went for the next 20 minutes and explained a technical pipeline of how we would partner with Korea and we would co-produce the series. They said, this is fantastic, but we're not interested. Get out of my office. So I went back to New Zealand with nothing and thinking maybe next time I shouldn't be so honest. But what I was trying to get across was that I could see a new technical way. Word got out there that this crazy Kiwi guy said no to Hollywood. And 9 months later, this first producer that I mentioned off was teamed up with the 2 other producers that I'd known. And they were now, Disney had bought Marvel and they were now Marvel Animation Studios. They called me up and said, Greg, we loved your Spider-Man test from a year ago. We're now Marvel. Can you make another test for the Hulk? We are going to do the Hulk Agents of Smash TV series. I asked if they were going to pay the money again. I said, will you pay for this test? The last one cost us $20,000. They said no, but if you do the test, you'll get the job. It was before we had video conferencing. Well, we had Skype, but nobody used it. It was just on a phone call. And I asked the 3 men, I said, could you just please close your eyes? Can you imagine the same test I delivered to you a year ago for Spider-Man? It'll be exactly the same, apart from it'll be green. It'll be the Hulk. They laughed and they said, fair enough, we understand. And we had no more money in our back pockets to try again. 3 days later, I got another call, come back to America. You have the deal. And I said, are you sure? Last time I came here, I didn't get that deal. They said, no, come on out. So credit card again, swipe that, fly out to America. And in the first meeting with Marvel, they said, Greg, look, we know that you've been bootstrapping it. We know that you've been in IT project management. Because, I was very open. I was talking to them about having to survive. And so how do we get you back to your company full time? And the answer was, which is what I said, just more work, and they said, perfect. That's exactly what we want to hear. Can you please fly back to New Zealand with Hulk Agents of Smash TV series, as well as Avengers Assemble? And so I came back to New Zealand, not with one TV series of 26 half hours, but two. And at that point, I thought, wow, we haven't achieved anything yet, but we've got some big work to now deliver. And what they had also said to me during this whole time, we love how you pitch the technical pipeline, and we want you to work with creative partners around the world. We also want to reduce the risk. We don't want to put all of the work into one studio. We want to be able to spread it across multiple partners. And so we worked with 8 different studios in Korea. We went on and produced 18 different productions from 2011 right through to 2020. And that was a really, my big story to you about how we had to show up a lot, form these creative partnerships at a small stage, keep showing up and extend those out, and then eventually take it to a wider scale and work with Korea, work with America, and work with our own team. Now, we had to also build that team up. And what surprised me was a lot of the original staff disappeared very quickly because they didn't like the slower pace of television that we had formed. You know, this long pipeline of repetitive work and stable income. They didn't like that, but others did. So a new artist came into the team. We also have, a nice challenge here in Wellington, New Zealand. And this leads into the next question of today, which is how do you retain your talent? Well, we have a big company called Weta FX, or back then Weta Digital, that would drain all the talent. And we had a really cool show in Marvel, and so we had a really good sort of stepping stone, and it was in television world. And I realized very early on, we just couldn't retain the staff. So I changed it to a business model rather than worrying about it. So I recruited some senior supervisors from Weta who were sick of doing 70 hours per week and had kids and mortgages and dogs and cats and things to look after. And, they came and worked 50 hours for us per week, Monday to Friday, way more stable job. They could look after their home life balance a lot better. But they were, ex Lord of the Rings, ex Avatar, experienced supervisors. And they came in and they ran my supervisor team. And then I hired from the universities around New Zealand, and just a little shout out about the ecosystem here is it works. The government has put good funding into the education system in entertainment in this space. And so we can hire out of there every year, new intakes, and take them through. And so rather than worry about losing talent, I just brought them in. But rather than just give them junior roles, I brought a philosophy in that I follow the All Blacks and the rugby side of things pretty well in terms of sport, and a rotation policy. Everybody was rotating the tasks that we had to do. I had senior and junior staff mixed it around. I had different senior staff working on tasks they weren't familiar with, because I never knew when I was going to go into work on the Monday morning, or it was actually the Friday afternoon, who was going to resign and go off to Weta, right? And so what I did was I kept this sort of flow going, crossbreeding right across all of our team in terms of skills. And so when somebody did leave, it impacted us, but not to the same level that it could have. And it also meant that we really trained up people. So people they weren't bored of their jobs. Yes, we were making this long form animation, but they were rotating through all the different tasks. And then I could actually have these really strong conversations like, what would you like to be? What's your career goal? How about we give you more of these tasks over the next 2 or 3 years? I know you're not going to stay with me forever, but that's okay. Let's get you up to a level that I am proud that you can apply for the next job and keep going. And I needed to have that mindset because there was always the next intake from university the next year. And there was always people dropping off after 2 or 3 years. And it's just the nature of the beast of what we do. Now, to wrap it up, I've probably done my 10 minutes, but I'll just flip into what I do now. So in 2020, like the rest of us, the world turned to shit and COVID came along, right? So it actually destroyed our animation studio. But we were fortunate enough to look ahead. In 2018 and 2019, my friend who's now my CTO for this new business that I used to work with in IT before the global financial crisis came to me and said, Greg, AI is ready. AI platforms and frameworks have been developed far enough ahead for us to start building some form of solution over top of. So we set out in 2019 and we put a plan together, a business plan to create another entity, a software company that would create a product using AI technologies. We started that, we raised pre-seed capital, we started that project in February 2020 and went into lockdown a week later. I'm pleased to say, though, we pushed through all of that. And by pushing through, what we learned was, first of all, no one's going to give you anything for free, right? It's going to be a lot of work. But secondly, we knew that we could make a difference because we had so much experience in terms of making a lot of content for a big player like Marvel. We woke up one day and I said, look, everybody needs help in analyzing stories, analyzing scripts, extracting that data out of those stories. So we've built a platform called Scriptsy. And what Scriptsy does is exactly that. You put in your script, within 3 to 5 minutes, you have a dashboard of insights to help filmmakers, directors, line producers, creative folk better plan their production, de-risk it before they go and make it. We released that a year ago in October at MIPCOM. And in terms of creative partnerships, I now have way more creative partnerships around the world than I've ever had before. We've had a lot of success this year with a lot of companies going into trialing phase of the software. We've just finished a massive 12-month beta testing phase. We're now officially commercial in terms of charging for the product. I've been into Europe 3 times this year, and I'm about to go back again in 2 weeks' time to Content London. And I guess the biggest point here is that you've got to make those relationships. You've got to keep talking about yourself. You've got to have a massive network, and you've got to continue to grow. And that's my story. DK, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Greg, for wrapping that up and also teasing us at the end with what you're up to as well. And I want to remind everybody here to ask the questions, formulate in your mind. These are some talented humans in front of you. You need to take that opportunity like Greg has taken his opportunity and Chantal before. So let's transition into another impressive human so I can put them in front of you and be inspired by and to learn from as well. We have Amber here, so I can invite Amber to turn on her mic. Amber, it's great to have you with us. She's the co-founder and CEO of The Granary, which you'll learn about, and doing other things, and have a deep history as well. Just IMDb her name. It's kind of fun. And it's great to have you with us, Amber. I know you're going to do a 2-minute, and then we'll probably turn into a quick conversation as well. So it's over to you, Amber.
Kia ora te whānau. I just have to say, I'm following some greatness there. So kia ora. Ko wai o. Waikato tani whārau, he piko he taniwha, he piko he taniwha. Ko tainui toko waka, ko Waikato toko awa. Ko taupari toko monga, ko Waikato tainui e Ngāti Raukawa toko iwi. Ko te wherewhere tu tangata. Nō nā au e whāau, ko Amber Māori toko ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So kia ora e te whānau family. Tainui is my waka, my canoe. Waikato is my river. Taupiri is my mountain. Waikato Tainui and Ngāti Raukawa are my iwi, my tribes. I honour my ancestor Te Wherewhere. I'm Amber Māori. I'm of the Four Winds. I am a builder of worlds. I am Wahine Māori, and I'm a co-founder and creative producer for the Granary Studios. And I would like to acknowledge DK for his warm welcome. So kia ora, and for extending me the invitation to be here today. I do have a concussion, but I'm going to plow on through. So I appreciate anything that you throw at me. I might just take some time to do and to share my information back. But for the past decade, I've been deeply buried in the world of hobbits, superheroes, and blue giant aliens, having held several senior leadership positions within the Weta Group. Before I stepped full-time into the Granary, I led an integral technical department at one of the world's most renowned visual effects companies, Weta Digital, where I managed the data and render resources in APAC region's largest privately held data center. I have over 2 decades of experience that spans over 100 projects in the entertainment industry. That includes Academy Award-winning feature films, Emmy Award episodic television series, industry-acclaimed interactive projects, as well as independent and local productions. I started at film school in the United Kingdom. I actually was born in Aotearoa, but raised from the age of about 12, 13 in the UK. I went to the University of Arts in London, and so that's where I started. I was a camera assistant, and then I moved into, I guess, post-production. I was an editor's assistant. I also did producing assisting and directing assisting. So that's kind of like, I've done a lot of the gamut. And I also was in research and writing as well when I was in the UK. So for me, I'm very passionate about film, and that's, for me, was just learning as much as I could, as wide as I could, and as much as I could. So kia ora. My co-founder and creative life partner and I started the Granary to reconnect with our creative ambitions as storytellers. We are indie creative tech IP development studios, so we're invested in the next evolution of content creation and the convergence of filmmaking and game engine technology. We wanted to help create pathways for our rangatahi, our young people. We wanted to promote a sustainable industry whilst helping to blossom real-time animated content, workflows, and technology. And my vision is to help build a sustainable film and game industry here in Aotearoa. So one that Chantal talked to earlier, it empowers creativity. For me, it maintains sovereignty and celebrates diversity. And I wanted to see our people and stories thrive out in the world so that we may see ourselves, so that I may see myself. And I feel that the Granary has helped me to return to my why, which is at my heart a storyteller, and was my way of reconnecting back to, after spending 2 decades honing my craft and supporting others in their creative pursuits. Technology has helped to shape the way that we interact with others and how we tell and share our stories beyond our whānau, our family, and our communities. And technology has shifted not just the way we tell our stories, but also who tells these stories. And so new technologies are unlocking the power and potential of storytelling, and we are beginning to see the distribution of power in story creation. Technology, as great as it is, in my personal opinion, should not replace the impact and connection that a story at its heart will provide. And the heart of our stories is the art of our humanity. So in my role as a creative producer, I nurture creative expression. I help facilitate innovation in creative people, in our artists, our writers, our engineers. Therefore, it is my responsibility to protect their wairua, their spirit, their energy, and develop the technology and pipelines that enable and empower and enhance the work they do and not detract from it. But so for me, the most important thing in the world, it is he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. The people, the people, the people. So kia ora, that's me. Kia ora te whānau.
Kia ora. Thank you, Amber. I'm just going to ask you a follow-up question just because we've got a little bit of time left on the clock for you. And in terms of just asking you to broaden out the Granary for us as an experience. So if we came to you and that intersection of technology and storytelling, and like you say, your whakapapa reaching out to you through that kind of representation as well, what would you expect a client to experience, and what can you help with from the Granary?
So we tend to work with creatives right at the beginning. So we'll actually find emerging talent and stories that we want to be quite heavily involved with. So we will either create a writer's table, get the talent together, we just reminisce, rehearse, talk about all the things in the story development process. And then we will actually kind of talk them through what technology or what we have capability of doing in our in-house, and to start thinking differently about what they want to tell. So oftentimes we've been restricted just by on the price point, or on, as was mentioned, it can be very expensive, and we have smaller budgets here in New Zealand. And so we like to kind of explore what could we build in a gamified world, so in a level, and what can we actually tell. So if they're wanting, like especially if rangatahi are wanting to develop their own skills, we will train them in Unreal Engine. We will also help them develop the story. Then we want them to actually be able to immerse themselves in the world. What we have done is do workshops in ICVFX, so that's in-camera virtual effects that's on LED screens so that they can actually take the skill sets themselves and apply it. And then I guess we want to take you all the way through to shooting it. And what does that look like? Is it actually in camera on a screen, or is it just in a real-time animation? So you're just building a little 1-minute piece. And we're very early days. We're not as established as Greg has been, because I know the challenges. We set up just before COVID myself. And so we had to pivot very quickly. And it has been a learning experience building a small business as well. Yeah.
Definitely. And I know the Granary, check out the YouTube videos that gives you a really detailed exploration of what you offer and have been playing with as well in terms of that tech intersection and interface design as well, which is just fascinating. So thank you, Amber, again for your contribution. I'm then going to remind everybody on the call here to drop in your questions. This is a chance for you now to direct or open it up to the whole panel. As the MC, I'm going to play that privilege card and maybe asking the first question. And it's quite a wide media ecosystem question around the language of weightless exports. Now, I only bring that up specifically because in New Zealand, we all know what weightless exports mean in terms of our industries and stuff. However, in Wales, when I was there spending the year last time, just in the last year, there wasn't many people understanding that. They could get it straight away. They can kind of describe what it is, but as a direction, as policy direction, a kind of a tactic as well, a strategic tactic from you all. I love to hear where you have capitalized on that literacy set of understanding what weightless export means and what you're driving at in terms of that when it comes from New Zealand and your specific lens. So we're going to start with Chantal, come to Greg, and then Amber. So Chantal, over to you. Weightless export, discuss.
Sure thing. Yes, so I think the concept of a weightless export encompasses a number of things, and one of them is essentially normally a digital product. One that does not need to be put on a shipping container to traverse across the world. And the benefit of that is it's generally low emissions, but also it generally means that the jobs are being created in the country that the export is coming from. So for us, supporting the games industry in New Zealand, a big part of the government support around that is to help grow industries that are creating more of these weightless exports, because they're helping to generate jobs here, but additionally, those revenues that those products are returning to the country are coming from every region in the world. When you're exporting a physical good, typically you have to have distribution agreements with, say, Australia, and then China, and then the US, and there's quite a lot of infrastructure that goes behind setting up that output. However, with games, for example, we have our platforms as the distribution model. So we have Steam or a Nintendo Switch. And once you go live on that platform, you're pretty much in every region of the world, including Antarctica, if you want to be. It's more about localizing your languages so that you can connect with different cultures and communities. But the great thing about that is you have instant global expansion without the costs of physically moving goods. And that essentially helps raise the GDP. It's bringing income into the country, which is something that's not actually really easy to do in the physical goods space and takes a lot longer to achieve the same outcomes.
Well, thank you, Chantal. And over to you, Greg. Same question. Love to
Well,
get your take.
Yeah, for us, like, you know, running the animation studio was great, but it was bound by brick and mortar, right? So we had 2 floors here in Wellington, and we were sort of limited all of a sudden. We were 70 staff, which was great. We were huge, but it was harder to continue to grow that size. So we identified back in 2018, 2019, that it was good to pivot into a software-based solution for entertainment. Not only is, you know, I think everything that Chantal just said there, like, you know, centralizing it here, being able to sort of build a workforce around that. But the economies of scale are massive. Like, you know, so all of our platform is in AWS and Amazon, and we're sort of spread already around the world in most regions, and we can scale very, very quickly. And so as from a business point of view, it makes a lot of sense. And if you only have to look online for the number one platform that's out there in terms of entertainment, and it's YouTube. It's nothing else but from YouTube. And so digital content is the way to go. Creating digital resonating stories, whatever genre, whatever sort of niche that you might be in, you don't necessarily need a huge audience to resonate if you can get into a nice a niche sort of spot on YouTube or digital platform, and you can make it a viable business, and you can service that customer. And I think that's what it's all about.
Thank you, Greg. And Amber, what are you seeing in this space, especially with your background in specifically the film, but now going into an independent studio?
Greg has nailed it there. It is YouTube, and it is for, especially if you're wanting to like test an IP, and you're wanting to see, like, the way that we kind of work is we might have one or two people who come and work with us, but then we've got people working remotely as well, and that we've got a little remote pipeline going around, and so we can actually bring on people if we need to, or we can actually service others if they're bringing us onto a project as well. So we can actually just kind of grow when we can, and I guess it's expensive to do everything, and at the end of the day it's actually human hours, but testing things on YouTube is what I would recommend, and that has been helpful for me to see where like something small might pick up, like traversing into more like children's stories has been an interesting space, because that's not something that I've done before, and so testing some stuff out there just to see if that would be picked up and find its, as you say, its audience. Other areas, I guess, is just you're able to now, especially if you haven't had access to certain software or technology, you're actually able to train in it now. So you don't have to have a computer that is necessarily as beefy as the ones I probably have myself, but you can learn Unreal Engine, you can learn Blender. So there's opportunities for young people to actually expand and learn these skills so that they can go to other studios or come and work for us. There is a lot of training involved to take them to a point where we can get them to like deliver on shots. But they I've really enjoyed just exploring it. It's kind of where I had hoped things would go to, and then because of COVID we just had to, that's the way we had to keep building and just moving forward. And a lot of the times it's been training people online who work with us as well, because we just couldn't physically be with them.
Thank you. And if I can stay with you, Amber, because I've had a message come in and feel free to hit me up anonymously if you want me to ask a question on your behalf, but around indigeneity and representation as well.
Yeah.
And how is New Zealand kind of, I suppose, exerting that, showing that representation, indigeneity as well, because Wales has also, it is a bilingual nation, has its own myth and culture and stuff. So could you speak to that just for a second before I pass you over maybe to Chantel?
Yes. So just from a personal perspective, I guess Te Reo Māori is an official language of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and a lot of the early games or small programs that we had were actually to encourage the use of our language. So there would have been children's shows, animations, small games on your mobile phone, just to enhance, and to empower us into our language. Over time now, we're actually seeing some of our Indigenous developers and games actually start to promote our stories and our, I guess, based on our tikanga, our stories, our legends, and they're in development and they're taking those out to the world. It's about raising funds so that they could do that. And then from I guess my space in the film space, we've had the benefit of some funding from the government that actually invested in through the COVID era, where they were like, okay, what sort of stories are out there? And so we were able to actually capture I think there was 6 to 7 films that wouldn't necessarily have been able to raise the funds, because it might have been from a different perspective than what would be traditionally seen as budget, or give you a lot of money back. They've actually been incredibly powerful. And so I have to apologize, because My memory is not all there at the moment with that, but there's they've all come out in the last 2 years, and I'm very, very proud of those films. But they've actually been able to get box office, and so the investment of that funding to diversify our stories to go out to the world has meant that we can actually start capturing audiences overseas. And they've just started with the Film Commission to send a small contingent over to LA, which, as Greg mentioned, we need to be seen, so that we can start building up relationships with others, and to actually try and see if we can then find funding as producers to bring that back to Aotearoa, so we can start telling our stories. It may be from whomever's perspective, but especially for Māori, there's a few of us out there at the moment trying to find that putia that funds. So, yes.
Thank you, Amber. No, and Chantal, from your funding perspective, are you serving that community? Are you being very aware of that representation and a Māori kind of voice and Pacifica voice as well?
Yes, it's incredibly important, and something that we've continued to make sure is part of the wider conversation in the games industry. Because we're smaller, I think we do get together quite regularly, and we kind of hold each other accountable, I suppose, to what our expectations of how we work together are. And one of the things that has pulled through very strongly over the last decade is the need for cultural consultation. So if you are looking to, I suppose, represent any culture, particularly our Indigenous culture in New Zealand, but any culture around the world, that you make sure to consult those people. And in New Zealand, that actually goes really deep. So it's quite important to understand that there are lots of things that you just don't know unless you talk to people that have grown up in that space. For example, tā moko, the Māori facial tattoo, is unique like a fingerprint to every person, and that is actually detailing their specific ancestry. So if, say, a film does a copy of someone's tā moko that they've seen in Google Images because they've used that as inspiration, that's actually stealing someone's ancestral history and putting it out there for the world without permission. Now, that's something you just wouldn't know unless you actually spent time consulting with each culture. And so cultural consultation has become a really important part of how we go about that work. And to my knowledge, I'm not aware of any New Zealand game studios that are integrating Māori content into their games without Māori game developers present or as founders of those businesses. Because even, for example, Metia Interactive, which has been around for about 25 years, Māori founded Māori business. Maru, who is the founder of that company, she is making a game called Guardian Maya. It's really incredible. Definitely check out the trailer. And she's not only consulted her local tribe, her iwi, but she's actually consulted lots of other iwi around the country just to make sure that the people she's talking to and her family aren't biased towards maybe one version of a historical story. She's wanting to make sure she's representing more voices than that. And so that's just a little understanding of the importance of having these conversations. And at New Zealand On Air, legislatively, actually, we are an organisation that's funded by the government. We're a Crown entity. And what the rest of New Zealand On Air does is it funds movies, documentaries, TV, journalism, music, and games. But it is legislatively mandated to make sure it's representing all communities and lots of diverse voices, including Māori and Pacifica. And one last thing I'll add is that CODE, the Centre of Digital Excellence, which I mentioned earlier, they also understood the importance of hearing these underrepresented voices from our Māori community, but also Indigenous communities abroad. So they actually started the world's first digital Indigenous Games conference. They connected with the embassies of different countries and got them to fly speakers from all of these tribes around the world into New Zealand for the world's first Indigenous conference, and it was called Whare Karioi. And I actually, as a non-Indigenous person, sort of submitted a letter saying, if it was possible for me to sit and listen, if there is space for me, I would love to attend so I can just learn. And I was very fortunate to be given space to sit and listen to these conversations. And it was an incredibly profound experience hearing from Sami tribes sort of in Scandinavia right over to the Cook Inlet tribe from Alaska. And there were so many things that connected them, shared experiences and the way they really value the land and their people and community. But also it taught me a lot about conversations and questions that you need to ask if you're thinking of being influenced by those cultures in your creative endeavors.
Beautiful. Thank you, Chantal. Thank you, Amber, as well, for your contributions there to broaden our understanding of that. I'm going to transition to Greg. There's a specific question for you. That's why I was keeping you there, just because there's a question from Andrew asking about best advice for pitching specifically new IP to potential broadcasters, and what you see as the positives in the changing landscape, series production with streaming content being so dominant now. So kind of eking into your history, could you respond to Andrew's question there?
Yes, sure. So I think like if everything, when you're pitching, doesn't matter what you're pitching. If you're pitching a story, you're pitching an IP, you're pitching software, my software that we pitch, clarity is really, really important. You've got to be able to get that pitch down, that story the idea that you have down to, a few sentences. And it's got to be very, very clear. And then over top of that, if you can get that clarity right, and by the way, that takes a lot of practice. Even DK will tell you that for his own public speaking, it takes a long time to find the clarity in your specific pitch for a specific idea. But once you have that, it becomes a lot easier because you can go into a broadcaster, you can go into a streamer, and you can pitch that idea nice and sharp, nice and clear, and they will get it, right? If you're not sharp with that, then they'll ask, is it like this? Is it like that? And you'll just end up sort of like, I'm saying it can be like that if that's what you want it to be. You're not very strong now in your pitch. So you need to have clear goals about what you're trying to achieve with that brand and where you think it resonates in the marketplace. And then on top of that, make sure you pitch to the right person, right? So your audience is always key. So you wouldn't go into, BBC Studios and pitch probably a horror because they don't want a horror. It's the wrong audience, So, where are you pitching? What are you pitching to? And make sure they don't have something on their slate that they have something similar, right? Because that often is the case. Now, I know that you've probably heard all that before, but it is as simple as that. You need to do your homework. You need to be able to keep your message very tight and clear and pitch it. On the streaming question, I guess the streamers have brought new problems as much as anything. But I think what's interesting with the streamers is you produce a lot less content initially for an idea, right? So season 1 is a lot shorter than it used to be. Like when we do broadcast work, you might have to do 5211s or for kids programming, something like quite long, where it's really been cut down for streamers. You only get one chance, I guess, a little bit with a streamer. You get season 1, and it could only be 10 or 12 episodes. But they're testing. It's a very agile way of thinking. So you got to get it right within those 10 or 12 episodes. And then if you hit their metrics, you get another season. They don't necessarily, I guess the challenge with the streamers is that they, up until recently, they haven't been giving away a lot of their stats, and I know they have to now about how you're performing. But, it's a starting point for some big brands. So just as much as YouTube is a starting point, and I can see there's another question around there about monetization on that. I think if you can get it, if you believe that, especially for kids programming, that the streamers are a place to go, then take it there, right? Take it there and really push that envelope. I mean, they're looking for content. It's very competitive, that space. But like everything else, if you don't have that pitch right, you'll struggle. So.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. I'm going to ask for a bit of a quick fire from you. And it's an unfair question in a quick fire scenario, just because I'm appreciative for all your time and the people online. And it is around what Adam was kind of asking about fostering collaboration, but I'm going to broaden it open. And what are your top tips around fostering not just collaboration, but also leading creatives as well in that collaborative space from all your world of experience? And you're going to have different responses to that. And I'm going to go in reverse order: Amber, Greg, and Chantal. So Amber, what's your take on your top tips? A bit punchy.
Top tips. That's amazing. Sorry, it's just got to think punchiness now. The way that I work with creatives is that I just believe in them. So if they are afraid of something, I just help guide them through. If it's something useful to technology, or if it's an idea that they want to explore but they don't really know how, I just kind of like empower them into a space. I apologize, you've asked me to go quick. Other things
It's
I would
okay.
say with collaborative partnerships is listening a lot. It's a lot of understanding, cups of tea I call it, where I listen to what is necessary or needed in the creative partnership, and then I try and create an opportunity to foster that. Yeah, kia ora.
Love that. Greg, what about you? Top tips, please, for collaboration and leading creatives.
Yeah, I have 4 things: learn, listen, laugh, and land. So learn, I encourage everybody to learn. Just keep learning. It's always changing. Everything's changing. Learn. Don't be afraid of it. Listen. Not enough of us listen, so ask questions, have advisors around you, peers that know more than you do, that can give you advice. Listen into that. Don't be afraid to make mistakes and laugh about those mistakes. Like, that's a really big one. Like, it's so easy to get so hung up and caught up in this and so stressed out. I make a lot of mistakes, and behind closed doors, I might let out a few bad words, but ultimately I get to a point that I'm laughing about the situation I got myself in, and how do you get out of it. And what I mean by land, my 4th one is deliver. So land on your feet and deliver something. Like, only by delivering something you can jump to the next cycle of that and learn again, right? Learn from mistakes in the past, learn about new technologies, learn about new ways, keep going through the process and land and start again and reset. And that's just what I teach anybody around me.
Thank you, Greg. And Chantal, what about your wisdom that we can squeeze from you?
Yeah, so I think one of the first things I do when I'm working with a team of creatives is I actually look at how they approach their goals. So a lot of businesses will kind of do individual goals with people that are focused on technical upskilling, but actually I change them with my team to have 3 types of goals. And the first is, how can I be a better team member? The second is maybe a technical goal that's personal to them. And the third is, how can I be a better member of my wider community? And by changing that viewpoint from being very self-focused, individual career mindsets, I watched my teams over time completely transition to the way they work together. Their favorite thing, moving from something that achieved as an individual into being how that helped a team member achieve something together. And I think as part of that as well, you build in mentorship. So you bring in those seniors that can upskill your juniors. You remove ego from leadership. And you show, like Greg said, that you're comfortable admitting when you've made mistakes or when you've kind of done something wrong and what you've learned from it. Because actually, I think we've all experienced as a junior in any industry, feeling that desire to be perfect and not wanting to admit when you need help. But when you can see a leader asking for help or admitting when they've made a mistake, then you might not bash your head against a problem for an entire week before you reach out to someone and actually kind of learn a new way to approach it. 2 more quick points, which is upskilling people in timely, kind feedback so that they're easily able to share critique so that they can work together towards a common goal. Otherwise, what you can tend to end up is design by committee, where everyone wants everyone to get what they want, which is very nice, but it can dilute the vision of the project, and ultimately you end up with something that's maybe actually not as strong as if you figure out how to make creative compromises together. And the last is, don't overpromise and underdeliver. You have to build trust through actually following through on actions. And I think with your people, but also with your clients or platforms or publishers, being honest about the capacity of your team, the size of your team, and what you're able to achieve, and all of those things, I think actually makes them come back to you over and over again. And it's been my experience with some of the biggest platforms in the world, was that they would come to me and say, hey, we need this thing in 2 days. And I'd say, actually, our team's quite small. We don't have a marketing department. We have 1 marketing person who's already scheduled for the next month. So we can do that in a month, and this is why it'd be worth the wait. And you know what? Every single time they said, okay, we'll wait. That's fine. We understand you're small. So not always feeling the need to say yes and how high should I jump, but actually, yeah, don't overpromise, underdeliver. Just have a conversation about it.
Love those insights. As we're over time, I appreciate that we're all getting late into the evening and people are getting into their morning. So I'm going to ask you one question to wrap up. Forgive me, Jaya, I know there's a question about what you can identify for Wales, and hopefully you can extract that. For me, it is about delivering, saying what you'll do, build relationships, get out there, prove, and build those creative relationships in person. But the last question I'm going to ask you is, what are you hopeful for at this intersection of technology and media and the convergence of lots of things like AI and other platforms? But what's one single thing in the New Zealand ecosystem that you hope Wales could maybe learn from, that you're hopeful for? And again, I'm going to do in reverse order. So Chantal, Greg, and Amber last, if that's okay. So Chantal, what are you hopeful for going forward now into 2025?
I think I would love to see our industries be as diverse as the audiences that we're serving. So equitable pathways because actually it just makes teams more creative. My experience has been, as the teams I've worked with have become more diverse in terms of diversity of thought, as well as gender and cultural background, they become more creative, empathetic, innovative, communicative. And then I think when we kind of get on the topic of things like AI, it's just responsible design and consultation with industries, because I think you can actually do it really well to uplift industries by actually talking with them about what their needs are and what their fears are and designing products around that. And there are actually some AI companies doing that. And I think that they will actually get loyalty from the industries that they consult over the big companies that are, I suppose, have a different approach of scraping the internet for all of their content. So I think, responsible design, equitable pathways.
Thank you, Chantal. It's lovely. And I love the way we started with that diversity as well. Greg, what are you hopeful for as we come into 2025?
A lot more collaboration. That's sort of where we target our thought process. Something that we're trying to challenge. And thanks for putting that in there, Chantal. We believe we are one of those good AI companies, because we don't write the story for you. We do not tell you what to do, but we provide a platform that's actually collaborative. And we want to sort of really open up that script and get different teams that are part of that production to identify problems early in the story, elevate the story, and figure out how you're going to produce that within whatever budget you have. So that collaborative approach is something that I think is really important, but also is a synergy across everything we do anyway. So for a long time, when I was running mechanic animation here in New Zealand, I wanted to be a lot more collaborative with our partners like Weta, so that we could not just then poach my staff, but we could actually feed into their larger ecosystem. And I think for a lot of companies around the world, that collaborative approach means you don't have to be an expert at everything, but you can still work together and get a lot on screen. And to roll back even just for the Marvel analogy there, it ended up being America, Korea, South Korea, and us producing all of those animated shows. And it was really, very highly collaborative. And it was good fun. It's much more fun to work with teams, not necessarily Microsoft Teams, but teams, to have a good life and a good response. So being collaborative is just, I think, key.
Thank you, Greg. And Amber, last but not least.
Kia ora. For me, as today actually has been a big day for us in Te Ao Māori and our Titiri partners. And so I would say actually my hope for the future is actually our rangatahi, our young people, because what I have seen in the content that's been coming out over the last 9 days for just across Instagram, and I know there's been a lot of TikToks going on, but just the stories and the way that they're actually sharing what's going on in our world and how we're standing up for our tipuna, for our ancestors, for our mokopuna, it's our grandchildren, our future, that has been really empowering. So if you'd asked me this question maybe 2 weeks ago, it might have been something completely different. But now I'm no, I'm very excited for the future of where our stories will go, how we're going to get a platform out to the world, because, it's being picked up, our stories are being heard, what's going on for us. And so I'm just excited to see where this next year takes us in the storytelling space, and what our rangatahi will produce, our young people. So kia ora. Thanks.
Well, it leaves me to thank our wonderful panel, Chantel, Greg, and Amber here, for staying up late and sharing so much of themselves, their insights, their wisdom. Hopefully you got so much from this as well, our participants online. Thank you for your time and attention here this morning over there in Cymru, Wales. It's been delightful to bring you these experiences. Thanks to Media Cymru and Creative Collective for also creating this platform